BP added more than $70 billion to the U.S. economy in 2022 by making investments from coast to coast. Investments like building charging hubs for fleets of electric buses in California and starting up new infrastructure in the Gulf of Mexico. It's and, not or. See what doing both means for energy nationwide at bp.com/investing in America.
You might be right. It's simple, but something you almost never hear in politics today, with each side more concerned about scoring political points than solving problems. I'm Bill Haslam, a Republican.
And I'm Phil Bredesen, a Democrat. We're former Tennessee governors, and we invite you to listen to our podcast, You Might Be Right. Join us and guests like Al Gore, Paul Ryan, Judy Woodruff, as we take on important issues facing our country.
Listen and subscribe to You Might Be Right, a new podcast from the Baker School at the University of Tennessee.
I'm your host, Annie Bowles, and this is News du Jour. Welcome to News du Jour. You may be wondering, why am I, Annie Bowles, here hosting this podcast? I usually start by telling people I'm a political baby. You see, my parents met working on Capitol Hill. By the time I was 2, I had been in my first political commercial and even got lost crawling around the West Wing. Don't worry, Al Gore found me. My family then moved abroad when I was 9, and I attended an international school in Brussels with kids from all over the world. And it is this type of global perspective that I also bring to our show. I graduated from American University in DC after studying political science and art history, as well as interning on both sides of Capitol Hill. I even interned down the hall from where my parents met. I'm now pursuing a professional certificate in journalism at NYU in conjunction with Rolling Stone magazine. I guess I was always that friend in the group who cared deeply about not just what was going on politically, but also globally. I often kept my own friends informed through high school and into young adulthood, so I guess I've always done a version of this show. I'm genuinely passionate about following the news, and I'm here to break it down for you guys every weekday. We always strive to be a calmer space to get your news. Or, as one listener put it, like getting your news from a well-informed bestie. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, guys, so I am literally shaking to be telling you guys this. I'm so excited. But today I got off the phone with 2 different major podcasters, Jake Deptula and Jamie Beebe from Strictly Stalking, and then Nikki Adamando and Michelle Horton from the Believe Her podcast. Both are going to be helping to promote April's case, her story, Oklahoma Senate Bill 1470, and just a better understanding of criminalized survivorship generally. I cannot believe I'm saying that. I'm so excited. Even getting on the phone with them just kind of blew our minds. But I think when, you're doing work that's really important, it rings true for a lot of people. Anyway, I don't know how it's happening, but it is happening. So Nikki Adamando, she is actually the inspiration behind 1470. She was freed due to a bill that was very similar out of New York. I think I've mentioned it on our show before. If you listen to our episode with Colleen McCarty, I'd be shocked if it didn't come up. But Nikki is going to be coming on our show. She's now free. She's a mom of 2. And while she was incarcerated, her sister, Michelle Horton, did everything she could to help Nikki. She raised her 2 children. She fought for her tirelessly, whether it was through the court system, on the podcast, through passing legislation. I mean, her sister was moving mountains to get her out. And now Nikki is home. And that is just proof that this legislation can do big things. And I want to remind you guys, it is coming up for a vote in the Oklahoma Senate very soon, probably next week. So I'm going to be keeping you guys posted. And if you are someone who is local here in Oklahoma and you would like to be there that day for the Senate vote, it would mean the world to us. It would mean the world to the survivors, and it may help get this bill passed. So anyway, stay tuned for all of that information and for the episode with Nikki Adamondo and our episode on Strictly Stalking. All of that is in the works now, and we're going to be putting it out ASAP. Okay, and without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into our normal News du Jour episode for today. So the State of the Union is just beginning as I am recording this. However, I wanted to let you guys know that word on the street, aka word in the New York Times, is that Biden plans to put something in his speech tonight about building a pier off of Gaza to facilitate aid, which is a really interesting idea. However, it does kind of remind me of suggestions from sort of hard right, far right, Israeli government officials who were suggesting building an island and moving people there. You know, that just is, so problematic in so many different directions. So, I mean, it's just interesting. I'm going to definitely be listening for this plan. I'm interested, obviously in however we can get aid to the people who really need it the most. But moving people to an island is just so concerning as a thought that, anyway, we'll discuss in detail whatever it is that's said at the State of the Union tonight on Monday's episode. So today is kind of a lighter news day, but I did have a few important stories I wanted to go over with you guys. First and foremost, Sweden becoming a NATO state. Secondly, Alabama passes a law to protect IVF. And then lastly, and this one is really fascinating, the link between a gunman's brain damage and his violent acts. This is something that's being studied really in depth right now, and they've found some linkages with a specific case. So we're going to discuss that. Like I said, we're going to kick off with Sweden. So it's official. Sweden formally joined the NATO alliance, becoming its 32nd member yesterday. This is a historical moment, especially because what prompted this move was Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And that's specifically who this move will piss off, Vladimir Putin. He does not want to see NATO strengthened. He does not want to see it growing. He wants to have the upper hand. But now, after this change, he shares a much longer border with NATO than ever before. But regardless of Russia and Putin, history was made today for both Sweden and the NATO alliance at large. Congratulations. A ceremony will be planned for this coming Monday where the Swedish flag will be raised over NATO headquarters in Brussels, which, if you guys remember, is my former childhood home. Very exciting, and congratulations to everyone involved. And next up for today, Alabama passes a law to protect IVF. So obviously the ruling that embryos are children in Alabama really rattled the fertility industry nationwide. But now the fertility industry in Alabama specifically is responding. They have specifically passed a law that will protect in vitro fertilization providers and shipping companies from both civil and criminal liability when it comes to embryos. And honestly, this was an incredibly quick turnaround when it comes to legislation. As you can see with our work with Senate Bill 1470, the wheels usually turn a lot slower. This was record time from what in recent memory at least, but it passed with overwhelming support, 81-12 in the House and 29-1 in the Senate. So, this just goes to show they can get things done and on a quick timeline when they are properly motivated. Lawmakers are obviously trying to get things back on track for fertility clinics and the families desperate to have a child. But at the same time, this leaves a lot of ambiguity when it comes to what this ruling actually means. Obviously, there are a lot of, practical real world differences between an embryo and a child. That's why there are two different names for them. One is frozen, the other needs active caring for. One has a social security number, the other one doesn't. One needs foster care if they don't have parents, the other doesn't. From a legal and a governmental standpoint, there's so many differences. And this is something that Alabama will have to address at some point in the future. But for now, they'll pass the buck. And lastly for today, I wanted to talk about the gunman's brain damage. So I thought this was a truly fascinating story, and it was great to have a slow news day where we could really dive into the subject. So we have long heard that head injuries can lead to violent behavior, whether it's football players acting violent off the field or serial killers who experienced physical childhood trauma. Head injuries have often been linked to the most depraved acts humans, mostly men, commit. And just now, the brain of the gunman in Maine has been examined, and the results are in line with that of previous studies. You see, this gunman was a veteran, if you guys remember, and when the medical examiner performed his autopsy, they saw significant damage to his brain. They believe that this damage is most likely linked to his military service. It is the kind of damage that can occur from being exposed to repeated blasts. The gunman, Robert Card, was actually a grenade instructor in the Army Reserves, so he was obviously exposed to a ton of these blasts just as part of his job. Ahead of the deadly shooting, his friends and family reported to police that he would likely commit such an act. They reported that Card was having trouble with a range of symptoms. Some of those symptoms included hearing voices, paranoid delusions, erratic and violent dialogue. Boston University's CTE Center actually examined his brain because they are the leading research center on violent acts related to head injuries, but especially in athletes. They said that Card's damage was not what is referred to as CTE or chronic traumatic encephalopathy, but rather it was a type of brain damage that is more common among veterans, but that it was very substantial. And they said, quote, based on our previous studies, it is likely that these brain injuries played a role in his symptoms, end quote. I doubt if any of this is any consolation to the family members whose loved ones were brutally murdered by Card, but it is a lesson to learn for society more broadly. If a loved one of yours is experiencing these symptoms, especially if they've been an athlete, a veteran, or suffered any type of trauma, be it physical or psychological, make sure to get them help if you can. Obviously, do call the police. That is a great idea. And obviously, Card's loved ones did that. But please don't stop there. Sadly, the police don't often help in these types of incidents. They wait until a crime is actually committed to step in. But if a loved one is experiencing these symptoms, they likely need therapy and or medical treatment. So obviously use your discretion. But I would encourage you, if you have someone in your life like this, to take some kind of action before things spiral out of control. I bet Card's loved ones really wish that they had the opportunity back to do that now. And that for today is the news du jour. I hope you guys have such a great weekend. Today, I wanted to leave you guys with the quote, "Don't let the noise of other people's opinions drown out your own inner voice." If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use to listen. A rate and review on that platform or a shout out on social media would mean the world to us and help us to be able to keep creating the news du jour and reach more people who need a calmer space to consume the news. But the best way to support all of our work is to become a patron at www.patreon.com/sugarfree media, and that is also linked in our show notes. You can follow us on social media at newsdujour.podcast on both Instagram and TikTok. You can follow my personal account at It's Annie Bowles on both platforms as well. Any little noises you may hear in the background are my rescue pup. He has a little separation anxiety and always records with me. We appreciate you listening and look forward to telling you about the news again next time on News du Jour.
Broadcasting from
I'm Roman Mars, host of 99% Invisible. I'm excited to be teaming up with Lexus GX and SiriusXM on some very special 99PI episodes. We're heading to some of the cities in the U.S. that have special meaning for me and exploring the ways that these cities marry form and function. To learn more about the Lexus GX and SiriusXM and Lexus vehicles, visit lexus.com/GX and SiriusXM.com/Lexus Trial. The all-new Lexus GX. Live up to it. Check out the 99% Invisible feed now and listen to these special episodes.
This is a message for anyone with high LDL-C or bad cholesterol who has had or is at risk of having a cardiovascular adverse event. Merck is studying an investigational medication to see whether it may help lower the risk of future cardiovascular adverse events. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death worldwide, and in the United States alone, there are over 73 million people living with high LDL-C. To learn about whether you may qualify, visit CoralReefStudies.com now. Again, that is CoralReefStudies.com.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.